Hello everyone, I welcome you again in another discussion of Master Mains PYQ. Today we are taking up geography and today's question is discuss the consequence of climate change on the food security in tropical countries. So it was a 10 marker and you have to use 150 words to write this question. Also remember you have time limitation while you are writing in the actual exam. So in this, let me talk about this initiative again. And I would like to remind all of you, those who are watching for the first time, this is a free initiative where you can write PYQs every day. You can watch these discussions. Apart from this, please remember that you can write these answers and get them evaluated free of cost. So please do so and spread the word. Fine. So this question came in CSE 2023 GS paper 1 and the syllabus part in which this question can be located can vary depending on how you think about it. So it can be located in distribution of resources. Also, it can also be located in geophysical phenomena. So climate change, you all know that it is a geophysical phenomena and this having a lot of impact on various things. So here we can locate this question in this part of the syllabus. So this is the first thing which I would like to discuss. And the secondly, how you should approach answers in geography. So answers in geography should be very different from other topics. Here your answers should have diagrams, they should have maps and they should be written very beautifully. And while you are preparing for geography, always remember that the question asked in geography are a mix of static knowledge, current knowledge and the application of this knowledge. So it becomes a bit difficult for students to answer these questions. And while you are preparing, prepare current affairs and also always think about how you would use this knowledge while you are answering. So apart from this, let me discuss today's question. So today's question you can put in a hybrid type of question. So here static part is there, that is climate change, that's static knowledge you study in your foundation course or in your classroom course. But the other part, that is the challenge which is posed by climate change on food security, that too in tropical countries. So it becomes a bit difficult to apply this climate change knowledge onto food security. But let me give you good information, good news, that if you have analyzed past 4 years, 3 years question papers, or let's say past 10 years question papers, you must have developed this idea about this question trope, this question line of UPSC. So UPSC has asked in 2024 the impact of climate change on Himalayan glaciers, and in 2019 it has asked impact on coral life. In 2020 it has asked impact on forest resources or impact of forest resources on climate change. So UPSC on this climate change topic is very focused, first of all, and then they are asking in this line only that climate change is impacting many things. So they choose a thing and they will ask you to write the impacts. So while you are studying this part, you should remember that you need to write many dimensions. You need to write in very short manner because it is a 10 marker. So you can't go very broad in 1 or 2 dimensions. You have to bring in many dimensions. This is it. So I hope you will find it very easy to answer this question. So let us rightly jump into the answer to this question. So first thing first, let me discuss the structure of this answer. So it is a geography question and the structure is usual: introduction, body and conclusion, which you all know. Now in geography, how would you introduce an answer? So focus on the concept first of all, or the phenomena. So here the concept is climate change. It is very easy. Write about climate change, that it is a long-term change in the weather pattern and there are consequences of it. For example, certain phenomena are witnessed. So you can write it is a long-term change in weather pattern and it leads to extreme rainfall, cyclonic activity, global temperature change, etc., etc. And then connect this concept with the question, the demand of the question. The demand of the question is that it says that tropical countries are more vulnerable, specifically food security. So you can mention why these tropical countries are more vulnerable. So you can write that they are highly populated, first of all, then they have dependence on global weather pattern. Why? Because they are in tropics. So the global pattern is all very complex. The weather pattern is very complex in these areas, and they are also dependent on this weather. For example, largely they are agriculture led. So agriculture is dependent on rainfall also. Apart from this, you also mention, it may not be feasible for you to mention in an introduction, we will mention in conclusion, but here you can also write a line that these tropical countries are not well prepared to take up these challenges because they do not have funds, they do not have technology, they are largely poor, and the global GDP is also very skewed. The tropical countries are about 25% of the GDP of the temperate countries. So that you should remember. So what will happen with this kind of introduction is that the examiner will know exactly that you are addressing the demand of the question and you have understood the question. Apart from this idea, this concept, and then tropical countries, why they are vulnerable, this idea, you can also mention the other idea which I would like to tell you. The other idea is database. So database idea can be, you can mention that World Bank says that around 80% of the people who are mostly affected by global hunger challenge or food security challenge live in tropical countries. That's why it becomes very important to discuss the food security of tropical countries vis-a-vis climate change. That can be your simple introduction. So both the introduction are good. Fine. After an introduction, what you will do? You will jump into the body part. And I would suggest you to stick to very basic idea, that is, please address the demand of the question. The demand of the question is that you have to discuss the consequences of climate change on food security in tropical area. Don't jump here and there. Also, while you are writing points, remember, the more the points, the broader the points, the more the dimensions, better the marks. So write very short, don't go into deep discussions of one point, and mention as many points as possible. How you will generate these points? Think of food. Where do you get your food from? So it may be a farm, it may be a poultry house, it may be a marine ecosystem. Okay, so based on this you are getting your food, and you might live in different countries in tropical areas. So there you can generate many points. So climate change is impacting many things. So it is changing the, let's say, water availability, it is changing the diseases, pests, it is changing the let's say land, it is also impacting the human health. So all these aspects you keep in mind, the climate change aspect, that what climate change is doing, and then you remember all these areas from which you are sourcing your food, and combine these two, and you will get many points. Fine. So let us jump into the body part. So in body part, you write a subheading. The subheading can be simply consequences of climate change on food security in tropical areas, tropical countries. That way you can make a subheading. After writing this subheading, directly jump into the points. So first point you can discuss, it can be about your yield, crop yield. You can mention that crop yield is decreasing. Why? You can mention certain points. You can say incessant rainfall, the changing temperature, let's say the changing weather pattern, they impact the growing crops, and the crop yield is reducing. You can mention that in sub-Saharan Africa, the cropping pattern in maize or maize production has been impacted largely by the climate change. Okay, fine. After crop yield, you can discuss the water availability. How you can discuss water availability? You can say that because of rising temperature, again you will mention the rising temperature, you can mention the precipitation pattern, you will write that availability of water had changed. Some areas they have floods, they have too much water, and some areas they have scarcity of water for a longer period of time, and that leads to crop failures. For example, here you can mention the examples of Brazil. You can mention that the northeast part of Brazil is facing a lot of challenges. There they grow beans, they grow maize, or let's say they grow coffee beans. So these crops are impacted. Apart from this, you can mention Peru also. In Peru, the Andes glaciers, they are melting very rapidly, and the availability of water is impacted there. So what you need to mention in initial 4-5 points, don't go to examples of India. Always go to other tropical countries. That's the idea. Fine. After writing water availability and crop yield, you can simply write the pests. and disease. What you can talk about in pests and disease, you know what happens because of climate change, because of increased temperature and humid conditions. It is a favorable condition for pests to migrate from one place to another. Their population is very dense and very aggressive. Apart from this, the disease. So rising temperature, the microorganisms also become very active and new diseases come out and they spread like anything. So you can always mention that because of climate change, the intensity of pest attacks, the frequency of pest attacks is increasing because of the rising temperature and humid condition. Also, there are new and very dangerous diseases which are coming out and spreading very fast. That you can mention. You can give example of India, the locust attack. You can mention that. Fine. After writing these 3 points, you can discuss the 4th point, that will be altered cropping season. Also growing season. You can mention growing season. What is this altered growing season? So there is a pattern of cropping, let's say sowing of seeds, then growing a crop, and then cutting it and using it. So what is happening because of climate change? The weather is becoming very unstable. So the farmers with less technology, less wherewithals, what will happen with them? They will not predict well, and when they will not predict well, their crops will become vulnerable to the climate changes, the weather patterns. So that point you can mention. It is a general point, but it is a very important point because in tropical areas, the farmers are largely dependent on the rainfall or the weather pattern. So this point you can write. Fine. So the 5th point in this line can change a little bit. You can discuss, apart from this cropping thing, you can go into biodiversity. This will be a very good point. It can be a 5th point. You can mention biodiversity. What is happening with biodiversity? Biodiversity is being lost. So there are many pollinators. For example, bees are there. So because of loss of biodiversity, what will happen? Many crops will not be pollinated and crop failure will become a major challenge. Specifically, horticulture will be impacted. Apart from this part of biodiversity, one can be pollinators. Apart from this, you can mention coral life, coral or marine life. You can mention these 2 things also. So what will happen in corals? Because of rising temperature and salinity, the coral life will be destroyed, and that will lead to loss of biodiversity in the marine ecosystem, and there will be impact on fishing and seafood availability. So you can mention, let's say, Great Barrier Reef. It is being being disturbed, and the marine ecosystem is being challenged. So that way you can mention certain examples. Or you can go to Caribbean islands. There you can mention, or Pacific islands. You can mention 1 or 2 examples. Fine. India also you can mention in marine life that in India the marine let's say food availability is being challenged because of cyclonic activity. That way you can mention that there is a loss of food. Fine. After writing biodiversity point, you can simply relate with, let's say, sea level rise. So because of climate change, sea level will rise. So certain areas, or let's say majority of areas which are fertile, they are situated in coastal areas and they are low-lying areas. So for example, in Vietnam, there is a good example of Vietnam. The low-lying area of Vietnam, they are very fertile. But because of sea level rise, they have become non-arable. Why? Because the salty water enters the fertile land, it becomes infertile. So you can write the sea level rise and the loss of crop, or let's say arable land. This will impact the tropical countries largely. Fine. After writing this 6th point, you can mention the human health. This is a very unique point which I would like you to write, the human health point. So the 7th point can be, so you know the food security, it includes nutritional security. So because of climate change, the tropical areas will have more vector-borne diseases. Because of rising temperature, the viral infections will become more prone and people get disease, bacterial disease also, for example, diarrhea. So the ability to absorb nutrition will be impacted more in tropical areas. So the food security, although the food availability may be there, it can be ensured because of technological interventions, but because of lack of medical support and increased incidence of vector-borne diseases, the nutritional food security will be impacted in tropical areas more than temperate areas. So this is very unique point. After writing all these points, you can mention adaptation challenges. Why? Because we are talking about tropical countries. So as I have discussed earlier, that these countries do not have major funds. Now, what are the adaptation challenges? So governments in these areas are very limited when it comes to resources to tackle these problems. So they will not have enough funds. The problems are rising. They are rising in exponential manner. But the resources, the funds, the capabilities, the technologies, the resources are not rising at pace with the rising challenges. So the adaptation challenges are there. The governments are not coping up with the rising global climate challenges in the tropical areas. After writing this, you can also mention, let's say, the food price because of global market. So we have seen in climate in the COVID time, that the developed countries, they hoarded the resources available at that time. So this will happen with climate change also. So food prices will rise. So the tropical countries will be growing certain crops. They may be self-sustainable, but what will happen? The global market will flood with money and the crops will be taken to the developed areas. So the food prices will rise exponentially. For example, recently you have seen in India, Bangladesh and Pakistan region, the food prices have been rising like anything. The prices of tomato recently, they have risen a lot. So this will happen because of climate change. This can happen. So you mention certain examples. So all these points, these 9 points you mention. So the thing which you need to notice in these points is that these are very broad points and there are many dimensions. Human health is also there, environmental is also there, marine is also there, coral is there, glacier is there. All these things I have discussed. So you also keep in mind that while writing these analytical dimensions, you need to bring in different dimensions and write very brief points, mention examples from all around the world. What else I would like for you to have in your answers in geography? Make a map. So here you can make a simple map of, let's say, world map, and then you can mention these 3 tropical lines. So you can simply make a map. This is Africa, let's say this is India, this kind of map, and you can write tropical countries. That way a simple map can be drawn. Okay, so make a map. After writing this dimension, the consequences of climate change on the food security, you directly jump to the conclusion part. Don't write way forward or anything, because that is not the demand of the question and you do not have enough words. You only have 150 words and limited time. So how you can conclude? So I would give you 2 ideas. First idea is you bring in the sustainability into the picture. How you can become sustainable while tackling the climate change. So you empower farmers. So the idea is this: you empower the farmer, and you tackle the climate change. How you will tackle the climate change? Intergovernmental, international cooperation on technology, on funding, on values. So technology, funding and values, you cooperate internationally, intergovernmentally. This you write on tackling climate change. And how you would empower the farmer? You give them technology, you give them seeds, you give them irrigation and information. Prepare them. And combining these 2, you can make what? Agriculture, or let's say growing crops or food security, sustainable. That you write. This is one conclusion. Fine. So the global cooperation will also come. The farmers will also be tackled, farmer or the food grower. Second idea for conclusion can be intersectionality. What is intersectionality? You bring in the global intersectionality. You say that the global, let's say, north needs to come out with shared technology, shared information, shared innovation and global cooperation on funding, so as to empower the tropical nations which are not well prepared to tackle the climate change, specifically for food security, to address the upcoming challenges. That way you can bring in intersectionality, because the global north is well prepared, the global south is not. That is the tropical countries, they are not prepared. So the global north should cooperate with the global south. That way you can mention. So these two ideas you mention in the conclusion. Fine. So this is your overall discussion. The model answer is uploaded. Please upload your answers also, and we will evaluate it for free. This is from my side. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.